The lake was still half asleep when everything went off the rails. Sunlight had barely touched the water. My coffee wasn't tea even finished brewing, and Rachel was brushing her teeth with the slow, lazy rhythm of someone who, finally after months of chaos, was getting a peaceful weekend. We bought the cabin for exactly that reason. Silence, space, breathing room, but peace never lasts long when people like Karen exist. Rachel's phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating so sharply it startled both of us. She tapped it with a soapy finger, put it on speaker, and kept brushing her teeth. The voice on the other end didn't even hesitate. "Ma'am," the dispatcher said, "we received a 911 report stating that Rachel Merritt is unlawfully occupying a residence in Lake Pine Estates. Officers had been dispatched for removal." Rachel turned her head toward me, toothpaste foaming, eyebrows nearly reaching her hairline. Did someone just try to evict me from my own house? I didn't even need to guess. Only one person in this entire community had an imagination bold enough, an ego inflated enough to weaponize 911 like it was her personal complaint hotline. HOA, President Karen, the Queen of Clipboard Country, the Empress of Unnecessary Rules, the undisputed champion of making everything worse. She'd gone too far this time, and she had no idea. She had just made the biggest mistake possible, because she wasn't trying to evict just anyone. She was trying to evict Commander Rachel Merritt, head of the state police force, someone who could quote statutes faster than most people could check their voicemail. Before we go deeper, if you enjoy HOA chaos, insane neighbors, and stories where karma hits harder than a truck, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Anyway, the 911 call wasn't random. Not even close. Karen had been circling us like a vulture from the moment we arrived 3 days earlier. Back then, we thought she was just nosy, overbearing, a garden variety. HOA tyrant. We didn't realize she was slowly building up to something dramatic, ridiculous, and catastrophically illegal. We had moved into the cabin to unwind after Rachel's promotion. Running an entire state law enforcement division does things to a person: keeps you up at night, buries you in paperwork, fills your head with problems that never stop multiplying. The cabin was supposed to be our escape. Pine trees, cool air, quiet mornings, and a lake calm enough to erase a year's worth of stress in a single afternoon. We were barely 5 minutes into unloading groceries when Karen made her first appearance. She arrived in a white Lexus, rolling into our driveway like she owned the land, the trees, and maybe even the air surrounding it. She stepped out dressed like the walking embodiment of HOA power. Pearls, designer sunglasses, sweater too expensive for the weather, and a clipboard she held like it was a sword. She didn't greet us, didn't smile, didn't even acknowledge that we lived there. She just walked straight past us and started circling our cabin, scribbling notes like she was preparing to condemn the place. Rachel tried the friendly route. "Good morning. Can we help you?" Karen didn't even look up. "We've had unauthorized activity in this area." "Are you renters?" "No," Rachel said. "We own this cabin." Karen raised an eyebrow, like she'd just heard the world's funniest lie. "I don't recognize you." I stepped beside Rachel. "We were here last spring. I'm Dean. This is my wife, Rachel." Karen squared her shoulders like a hen puffing up its feathers. "I'm the HOA president," she announced, waiting for us to react as if she had revealed she was royalty. She pressed on. "We require occupancy notices through the community portal. You did not submit one." The portal, the ancient, half-broken website she worshipped like a sacred relic, was barely functional. Logging in crashed the page. The calendar showed dates from 2018. The menu looked like it had been designed by someone blindfolded. When Rachel politely explained we weren't aware owners needed to submit anything, Karen got the expression predators get when they smell weakness. Then she found her ammunition. My LLC, the cabin deed, and the fact that my name, not Rachel's, was on the paperwork. And from that moment, she latched onto one delusion with the enthusiasm only an HOA tyrant could muster. Rachel didn't belong here. The harassment started the next morning. the violations, the fake warnings, the ridiculous rules. And now, 3 days later, Karen had officially escalated to calling 911, and she had no idea she had just poked a sleeping dragon. The patrol cars showed up slowly, cautiously, almost apologetically. Blue lights flickered between the pines like confused fireflies as 2 officers stepped onto our gravel driveway. With the hesitation of men who already suspected the call they were dispatched to was nonsense. I stood at the kitchen window holding my coffee, watching them whisper to each other like, "Is this really the place?" Meanwhile, Rachel, still in her pajamas, opened the door before they even knocked. She didn't storm out. She didn't puff her chest. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply stepped into the doorway with a calm so steady it could unsettle anyone with a guilty conscience. "Good morning, officers," she said. "I understand someone reported me as an intruder in my own cabin." The younger officer blinked like his brain just short-circuited. "Yes. We received a 911 report claiming trespassing." Rachel gestured inside. "Do I look like someone in the middle of a break-in?" "I'm literally making breakfast." They entered politely, scanning the room, fishing rods, groceries, a half-sliced apple on the cutting board. Everything normal, except for the bizarre reason they were there. The younger cop flipped his notepad. "The complainant stated you were refusing to leave when told you're not an authorized occupant." Rachel let out the quietest breath of disbelief. "Officer, I live here. I pay for this home. The only reason my name isn't on the deed is because my husband purchased the cabin through an LLC. I'm his wife. I'm here by right, not by force." The older officer nodded almost immediately. You could tell he already saw the truth. This wasn't a criminal case. This was an HOA tantrum. But then it happened. The younger officer squinted at her ID, then froze. "Your name is Commander Mera?" "As in—" "Yes," Rachel said calmly. Everything changed in that instant. Both officers straightened so fast they looked like they'd been snapped upright by invisible strings. Hats came off, postures corrected. Voices softened. "Commander Mamauer." "Apologies, we were not informed," the older officer said, mortified. Rachel waved it off. "You're doing your job, but I need something documented." She picked up the TV remote and tapped our security camera feed onto the screen. And there she was, Karen, creeping around the cabin like a raccoon in pearls, photographing our recycling bin, measuring our firewood stack, pacing across the porch with a tape measure like she was assessing evidence in a crime drama. The older officer sighed. "Ma'am, that's trespassing." "And harassment," Rachel added, "and misuse of emergency services. If she called 911 knowing I live here." "She said you refused to leave," the younger officer admitted. Rachel folded her arms. "I refused to leave my breakfast." The 2 cops exchanged the universal "this is ridiculous" glance before the older one spoke gently. "Commander, if you want to file charges—" "Not yet," she said, eyes narrowing. "But I want every future call to this address logged formally. Every single one." "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." As they filled out the report, I watched Rachel closely. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shaken. She was focused like someone assembling a puzzle she already knew the ending to. When the officers finally left, apologizing 3 separate times, the younger one even asked, "Would you like extra patrols, ma'am?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't need protection. I need documentation." The moment the door closed behind them, I exhaled. That went better than expected. Rachel didn't laugh, didn't smile. She simply said, "Karen thinks this is a power struggle. She doesn't realize she'll just put herself on a collision course with actual law." And she was right. The 911 stunt wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Rachel and I sat on the porch, listening to the frogs, the cicadas, the calm we desperately wanted. But Rachel wasn't watching the lake. She was watching the road. "She's coming," she said quietly. "Anne, se was." Because at 8 p.m., Karen's Lexus crept down the street again, slow, silent. predatory her silhouette pressed against the window. Eyes sharp, jaw tight, watching our house like she was waiting for proof she'd won. "She wants to know if she scared me," Rachel murmured. "If calling 911 rattled me." Dee. Rachel didn't take her eyes off the Lexus. "No, but it told me something important." "What's that?" "She's escalating. And she won't stop until something burns. If you're still here, hit subscribe. Because what Karen does next, most people wouldn't believe it unless they saw the footage. The next morning, the war officially began. Not with sirens, not with police, not with shouting. It started with Karen's Lexus creeping down our road at 9:17 a.m. Exactly, moving slower than a funeral procession. She wasn't patrolling. She wasn't inspecting. She was checking whether her 911 stunt had gotten Rachel hauled away. I stood by the window with my coffee. That's her second pass this morning. Rachel didn't look surprised. She's trying to confirm whether fear did the job her authority couldn't. She stepped inside, picked up her phone, and scrolled with that razor-focused intensity she used when building a case. A second later, she turned the screen toward me. A fresh email. Subject line, in all caps, "Unauthorized occupant remains on property. Urgent action required." Sent B. Karin. Sent to the entire HOA board. Sent 3 hours before sunrise. Inside the email were wild claims, fabricated violations, fake confrontations, accusations, so bizarre they bordered on comedy. She even attached a blurry screenshot of Rachel jogging on the road, with a red arrow and the word loitering typed in what looked suspiciously like Comic Sans. I nearly spit out my coffee. Loitering. On the road we pay taxes for. Rachel didn't smile. She's not being dramatic. She's being strategic. The more she loses face, the more dangerous she becomes. By noon, another message hit our inbox, this one from the HOA treasurer, Greg, a nervous man who lived in spreadsheets the way monks live in monasteries. Due to recent complaints, the HOA board will hold a special session today. Please bring documentation. No greeting. No signature. No explanation. Rachel closed the email and said, "She's not slowing down. She's accelerating." I offered to come to the meeting. Rachel shook her head. "She wants to corner me." Let her try. The HOA clubhouse looked like a dentist's office, designed by someone who hated color beige walls, beige chairs, and a constant smell of paperwork. Even from the parking lot, I heard Karen's voice echo through the thin walls. She refuses to comply. She hasn't registered. She's disrupting community order. Community order. Her favorite phrase now. "Someone inside," probably Greg muttered nervously. "Karen, she's married to the property owner." "She's unverified," Karen snapped, like she was denying a boarding pass. Then Rachel's voice cut through the chaos. Sharp, precise. "If I may," she said. Instant silence. "Not only am I married to the deed owner, but I am also the co-executive on the LLC that owns the property. And though I didn't want to bring this up, I am the head of the state law enforcement division." You could have heard a pine needle drop. "So, unless you plan on taking this to a court," she continued, "I suggest we stop pretending this is anything more than personal harassment." Inside the truck, I grinned. A minute later, the clubhouse door opened. Rachel walked out, face unreadable. "How'd it go?" I asked. "They postponed the issue." Postponed. "They're afraid of her," she said simply. Too afraid to confront her. Too afraid to stop her. So they chose the most cowardly option. They bought her time. Rachel stared out the windshield. And when people like Karen feel cornered, they don't back down. They reach for a bigger weapon. She was right, because that evening, things escalated again. Just after dinner, we returned to the cabin. Rachel stepped onto the porch, then froze. The front door was open. Not wide open. Not foresaid. Just cracked like someone wanted us to notice. Rachel rushed inside. I followed, heartbeat pounding. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was smashed. But someone had been inside. A framed picture of us, face, a kitchen drawer half up and the same one where Rachel kept her off-duty badge. A coat draped over a chair instead of its hook. This wasn't theft. This was a message. Rachel's voice turned to steel. Activate incident. Report code red. Intrusion. Civil escalation. Suspected. Her phone chirped. An acknowledgement. She crossed the line. Rachel said quietly, but morning brought something even worse. A drone. A small, black quadcopter hovered outside our bedroom window, buzzing like a mechanical Hornetit's camera blinking red, recording us. I pushed the curtain aside. The drone tilted toward me, almost recognizing my face. She's trying to document us, I said. No, Rachel said without looking up. She's baiting us. I frowned. Why? Desperation makes people stupid, Rachel said. She wants me angry. She wants something she can twist into another complaint. Rachel calmly forwarded the intrusion footage to 3 state agencies. Then she made a phone call. Yes, she said coolly, I'd like to report unauthorized access using an HOA master key. She had proof, and Karen had no idea her little empire had just become evidence. If you think Karen has piqued her wrong, her next move involves a lawyer, a cease and desist letter, and the dumbest mistake she ever makes. The drone incident should have been the peak. It should have been the moment Karen realized she'd crossed into felony stupidity territory. But no. Karen wasn't done. She was only warming up. Around noon, just as Rachel finished filing the harassment reports, a car door slammed outside. Not a police cruiser this time. Not a neighbor. Something worse. Karen marched toward the cabin like she'd been rehearsing the walk in the mirror. Behind her trailed a young man in a cheap suit, carrying a briefcase so oversized it made him look like an intern hired to play lawyer at a costume party. Rachel stood, straightening her shirt. Let's get this over with. When she opened the door, Karen didn't even offer a greeting. She thrust her finger dramatically toward the man. Tell her, she ordered. The young lawyer cleared his throat, nervous, pale, sweating like the briefcase weighed more than his soul. Mamdai, I'm Stephen, representing the HOA advisory legal team. We've prepared a cease and desist order regarding your conduct and unauthorized presence on this. Rachel lifted a single hand. Who's one? Stephen froze mid-sentence like someone had hit pause. Stephen, she said gently. Do you know who I am? His eyes flicked to Karen, who nodded frantically, encouraging him to lie with his whole chest. She's a non-compliant occupant, Karen hissed. A threat to community order. Rachel ignored her completely. I'm Commander Rachel Merritt, she said, Director of the State Police Force. I oversee every department your HOA would call in an actual emergency. Stephen's face drained of blood. He stepped back. Like Rachel's title had physical force, Karen didn't back down. No, she doubled down. Your position doesn't matter, Karen snapped. This is my community, and you disrespect my authority. Rachel turned her gaze toward Karen Day, kind of calm, surgical stare that could peel paint off walls. Authority comes from law, Karen, she said, not from clipboards. Stephen whispered, Oh God, under his breath. Karen, now visibly trembling, reached into her purse and pulled out the drone controller, clutching it like a guilty child. Rachel held out her hand. The device, she said. Karen hesitated. Her jaw clenched. But the facade finally cracked. She placed the controller in Rachel's palm. Rachel powered it off with a simple, final click. Unauthorized surveillance neutralized, she said softly. The lawyer deflated. Karen spun around, stomping toward her Lexus like she was trying to break the gravel under her feet. Stephen hustled behind her, whispering frantic apologies. When they sped off, gravel spraying behind them, I exhaled. Was any of that legal? Rachel shrugged. Legal enough. And honestly, considering she was flying a drone at our bedroom window, she should be grateful I didn't do more. But the universe wasn't done delivering surprises. That evening, as Rachel washed dishes, Her phone buzzed. She dried her hands, checked the caller ID, and muttered, "Of course, Judge a man who'd known Rachel for years? Smart? Serious. Zero tolerance for nonsense." "Rachel," he said, voice clipped, "I've got something on my desk that, frankly, has me baffled." Rachel leaned against the counter. "What now?" "An emergency injunction request," he said. "Filed by Karen Pinebrook." Rachel closed her eyes. Hafford continued, "She's requesting the removal of a potentially unstable, unregistered individual from a residential community." Rochelle sighed. "Let me guess. The unstable individual is me." "Rachel, the filing is unhinged," he said. "Cupid legal jargon, fake citations, accusations that don't make sense. I'm rejecting it, but you need to know, she's going nuclear." Rachel thanked him and hung up. For a long moment, she just stared out the window at the darkening tree line. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "She's cornered. And cornered people don't get smarter. They get reckless." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because the next morning proved Rachel absolutely right. 2 black SUVs rolled down our road quiet. Official, unmistakable. The insignia on the doors made my stomach drop. State Ethics and Law Review Division. These weren't HOA referees. These were the people who dismantled corruption. Rachel stepped outside, calmly. The taller investigator spoke. "Commander Merritt, we're launching a formal inquiry into allegations of leadership abuse, false filings, and misuse of emergency access by a member of your HOA." He handed Rachel the paperwork. I swear I saw the exact moment Karen's empire began to crumble. Rachel nodded. "We'll cooperate fully." And just like that, Karen's authority wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing. But Karen. She wasn't built to surrender, and what she did next nearly destroyed the entire community. When the ethics investigators left, the neighborhood panic began immediately. By noon, our inbox was overflowing with emails from HOA board members apologizing, panicking, pretending they hadn't been cheering Karen on 2 days earlier. "We didn't know it was this serious. We never supported her actions. Please advise how we should cooperate." Every message was the same desperate attempt at survival. Except one. Karen wrote it. "This is a misunderstanding. I will resolve it personally." Rachel read it and let out the smallest, coldest laugh. "She thinks this is still about her authority. She hasn't realized it's out of her hands now." She was right, because by evening, a formal suspension notice was taped to Karen's front door, and by nightfall, the HOA board announced an emergency meeting, this time without Karen. For the first time since this war started, the air around Lake Pine actually felt lighter, but Rachel wasn't celebrating. We sat on the porch that night, the lake shimmering under the moon, the air still warm from the day. Rachel held her tea but didn't drink it. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "How can you tell?" "Because people like Karen don't go quietly. They only know how to push until something breaks." And she was right, because the very next morning, retaliation arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, not with flashing lights. With a package. A plain brown box sat on top of our mailbox. No postaja. No return address. Our cabin number scribbled in red ink that looked angry. Inside was a bird feeder. Just an empty bird feeder. And a folded note. "You might have won the board, but you don't control me." I handed it to Rachel like it was ticking. "She's testing boundaries," Rachel said calmly, "seeing how far she can push before she gets a reaction." But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Within 3 days, 9 more packages arrived. A hose, nozzle, a wind chime, gardening gloves, a packet of seeds. Random, harmless, unsettling. But package number 10, that one chilled the air. Rachel opened it, froze, and handed it to me. Inside was a cheap notebook filled with printed accusations, fake financial documents, fabricated spreadsheets, screenshots from unknown accounts, false allegations of tax crimes, claims of fraud, bribery, misconduct. None of it was real. All of it was crafted to look real. At the end was one chilling sentence. "You're not the only target." A knock sounded on the door. Vince, the accountant, who lived 2 houses down, stood pale as paper, his hands shaking. "Rachel, I need help." His voice cracked. He held out an email. Someone had sent it to 3 of his clients. It accused him of embezzlement, attached fake spreadsheets, fake transactions, fake evidence. Rachel read it silently. "She's expanding," Rachel murmured. "She's targeting people connected to us, trying to isolate us, trying to destabilize the neighborhood." "Why me?" Vince whispered. "What did I do?" "You exist," Rachel said. "That's all it takes." Vince looked ready to collapse. "What do I do?" "You report it," Rachel said. "Right now." She dialed the state cybercrimes unit, filed the report in minutes, walked Vince through every step until he stopped shaking. But I saw something behind Rachel's calm. Anger, not loud, not explosive. Organized, the kind of anger that builds plans. That night, Rachel sat at the dining table. Stacks of documents around her, screens glowing across the room. She didn't speak. For nearly an hour, she just worked collecting, categorizing, assembling. "Something's changing," I finally said. Rachel didn't look up. "She's shifting strategies," she said. "She's not using rules anymore. She's using fear." "How do you fight someone who hides in the shadows?" Rachel finally met my eyes. "You remove the shadows. C'est tout. Tomorrow, we bring everyone into the light." And she meant it, because the next afternoon, Rachel did something Karen never expected. She called a meeting. Not an HOA meeting. Not a board meeting. Not a boat, a gathering. At the old boat dock, under open sky. No titles, no committees, no rules. Just neighbors. 20 people came. They brought folding chairs, thermoses, uneasy expressions. When Rachel stepped onto the dock, the entire crowd quieted. And for the first time, they heard the full truth. But what Rachel told them next didn't just expose Karen. It shook the entire foundation of the HOA and triggered the event that would finally change everything. The meeting at the boat dock changed everything. Rachel didn't yell. She didn't blame. She didn't point fingers. She simply told the truth. Calm, clear, precise. She described Karen's manipulation, the break-ins, the drone, the fake spreadsheets, the false filings, the attempt to weaponize fear. She didn't embellish a single detail. She didn't need to. Truth, when spoken plainly, hits harder than shouting ever could. By the time she finished, the entire dock had gone silent. Not afraid, not sucked, awakened. For the first time, the neighbors weren't looking at Rachel like she was an outsider or a threat. They were looking at her like the only adult who had been in the room from day one. Rachel ended her speech with a line that hung in the air long after she walked off the dock. "It's not enough to remove toxic leaders. You must also build systems that stop the next one before they rise." That was the moment the neighborhood woke up. Within 24 hours, a petition circulated, not to punish Karen, not to exile her, but to tear down the rotten system she had twisted and rebuild it from scratch. By Monday, the vote passed with a landslide. The entire HOA board resigned, all except Greg, who stayed only to help stabilize things. Rachel was asked to lead the new committee. She declined instantly. "I'm not here to rule," she said. "I'm here to prevent." And that was exactly what she did. She helped rewrite the bylaws, helped add oversight, helped set term limits, helped create penalties for anyone who tried to abuse power again. For a brief moment, Lake Pine Estates felt like it was finally healing. Kids rode bikes again. Neighbors waved. Dogs barked harmlessly at squirrels instead of drones. The forest smelled like pine instead of tension. It felt like peace. But trauma doesn't vanish just because paperwork changes, and one quiet morning proved that. When I opened the mailbox, I froze. Sitting on top of the letters was a small white envelope in neat, thin, handwritten, the same slanted handwriting, the same red ink, the same uneasy energy. I handed it to Rachel. She slid her thumb under the flap and opened it carefully. Inside was a single photocopy of a state document, Karen's permanent ban from holding ANY authority in any HOA or community group statewide. At the bottom was one bold line: applicant barred indefinitely due to verified misconduct. No note, no signature, just the confirmation of a door closing forever. Rachel read it once, folded it neatly, slid it into an evidence sleeve, and placed it in her drawer. "How do you feel?" I asked softly. She exhaled. "Not victorious," she said. "Just clean. Like we stopped poison before it spread." That night, we sat on the dock under the moonlight. The lake shimmered, the trees whispered. The world finally felt safe. "Do you think she'll try again?" I asked. Rachel shook her head. "Not here. Not anywhere with power. The system works now." "Because of you," I said. Rachel leaned against me, eyes reflecting the water. "I didn't fix anything," she said. "I just reminded the system what justice looks like." We sat there for a long time. No drawness, no footsteps on gravel, no angry emails, just the calm hum of a world finally free from a woman who built her identity on fear. And as we watched the moon ripple across the lake's surface, something clicked in my mind. Karen never understood the difference between real power and borrowed power. Real power protects. Real power steadies. Real power doesn't shout or threaten. It stands firm, quiet, unwavering. That's what Rachel had done. What she always did. She didn't win through force or intimidation or fear. She won because she refused to bend, and because she understood one truth Karen never did. When someone uses power to hurt people, they aren't fighting rules. They're fighting consequences. And eventually, consequences win. The lake was peaceful again. The house was safe again. Rachel could finally breathe again. And for the first time since this nightmare began, so cooled